Hey guys, Jesse here, your NBA Vibe Navigator. I'm joined by my co host and NBA analyst, Mickey Swish. Say hello, Mickey.
Mickey here.
This is Dishing and Swishing. Again, we're off the blogs. This podcast is presented by your favorite data driven gambling model, Orb Analytics Limited. And again, for those of you who are looking for some locks in the football realm, heading into week 5, Sunday, the Orb NFL models are hitting at an astounding 64% against the spread for the 2024 NFL season. Isn't that crazy, Mickey?
64%. Get out of town. Get out of town. Come on.
I know. So if you like money, and I like money, head over to orbanalytics.substack.com. Back to the pod. This will be a weekly podcast where we cover all things NBA, your go to for hot takes, sharp bets, and nothing but net insights with Jesse, myself, and our Mickey Swish. With that being said, let me dish it over to Mickey with what's coming on today's pod.
On today's episode, we talk about some big things. We start off talking about Derrick Rose, his retirement, and what that means to the city of Chicago and the culture of the NBA. We talk about preseason overreactions because, of course, we should talk about these things regarding meaningless basketball before the regular season. Some storylines from last podcast that we didn't get to, some things leading into the NBA season. And we'd like to introduce a new segment called Dumpster Diving. We're finding teams that probably are not going to be doing so hot, but there are some things in there that catch our eye. So enjoy the second episode of Dishing and Swishing with Jesse and myself, Mickey. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy.
And Mickey, we have some new music for our intro. Our music is brought to you by Soft Cheese. Give them a listen wherever you find your music. Let's get into it. I think Karl Anthony Towns is the type of guy who would call travels in a pickup game.
Of course you would.
I just hate his face. Like, I look at him
Sure.
and I see him playing and I just see him whining all the time. And he's the dude at the pickup game who he calls fouls when they're not there. He drives and runs into you and calls a foul. He wants to shoot free throws. I feel like there's not a worse market for him to be at than New York.
I could not agree more. I was going to say the same thing about the fouls as well. And I also think that he's the guy when you're shooting around with a buddy and you're playing change, right? I'm shooting. When I make that basket, I should get it back. He's taking it and he's just walking the other direction.
Giving no change.
My brother, I just made that shot. Give me that shit back right now. He's no. Karl Anthony Towns, he's taking it out and he's like, it's my turn. It's my turn, Chief.
I like the
He's
idea.
the type of guy too.
I like the idea of us opening every podcast with like different jokes about Karl Anthony Towns, so we can play around with that.
Yeah,
idea.
it's a good. I kind of like it.
What's up, Mickey Swish?
Not much, man. Life is good. NBA season is here.
We got games, man.
NBA season's here.
We got real life basketball games. I saw the Celtics play in Abu Dhabi at like noon Eastern time. Looking interesting. Jaylen Brown hasn't taken his sunglasses off since I think they won the title. So look out, the rest of the NBA. He's coming for blood.
Oh, man. That's a star shining right there. He's got to cover his own eyes.
That's our best player. That's what some people are saying. That might be our best player.
We'll see. We'll see.
We will see, and we'll get into that. I want to talk a little bit preseason in a second, but welcome back to Dishing and Swishing, everybody. I feel like we should probably say that. Mickey, I think the first thing we have to address, there's news across the NBA landscape. A certain former MVP, Mr. Derrick Rose from your neck of the woods, a former Chicago Bull great, has retired. So I have some thoughts. I thought we could have a little bit of a discussion here. I am curious, as the Chicago Bulls fan among us, how to make you feel. How do you look back on Derrick Rose's time with the Bulls? It's been a while since he was there, but he's kind of bounced around since then. But yeah, just curious your reactions to the news.
Kind of expected the fact that he retired. His career has been what it has been the past few years, but the impact of him retiring, it is impossible to put into words the gravity of like what that meant to Chicago. Just in the immediate aftermath of everybody knowing, wow, Derrick Rose is retiring, it is such an incredible thing to like feel like this resurgence of affection and love and fandom for Derrick Rose, kind of reflecting on his career when he was a Chicago Bull. Um, he's a legend in Chicago. He influenced the NBA. We don't have to go into the X's and O's of it, but I think Derrick Rose changed the game. I genuinely believe that Derrick Rose changed the game of basketball, how the point guard position is played. Pre Derrick Rose, post Derrick Rose, I think he had a humongous impact in that. But outside of the statistics and his incredible performances and MVP and all that, forget that. The culture and the lore behind Derrick Rose is arguably like bigger than his actual box score performances. Like the affection for him in the city is. It feels like I'm in like the '90s watching Jordan. Right, I was born in '96, so I didn't obviously get a chance to watch any of that. But it feels like, to a degree, this is kind of what that must have felt like. Um, this appreciation for Rose is unbelievable, and it's amazing to see. I was never a diehard Rose fan. I was, of course, a fan of his, and respect and appreciate his game, and I've always liked him. But I was never a diehard. And even the way that I feel affection and this respect towards him, I've seen diehard Rose fans just with genuine tears in their eyes, reminiscing on what it was for him to be a Bull. I think his impact on the culture, his impact on the team, will never be forgotten. Um, I think this conversation about what his legacy is and what will happen in the future in terms of like his number being retired for a Bull or on the Bulls. Is that going to happen? Is it not? Is he a Hall of Famer? Will he make it into the Hall of Fame? Will he not? I feel like those are some really interesting conversations that I have had with some of my friends who are also here in Chicago, who are also obviously Bulls fans. And I think that conversation alone could take up an entire podcast episode. So it's the appreciation from the NBA, other players, coaches, analysts. It was really cool to see because I've never seen something that outpouring for a player when he had retired. Maybe something like Kobe Bryant, obviously, is a humongous deal, but I've never seen anything like this from like the whole community, especially regarding Rose and like what could have been if it wasn't for his injury-plagued career. So just it sounds crazy, but it was kind of like a weird emotional time period. Seeing all these highlights and hearing all these stories and seeing all these clips kind of resurface on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, just all social media, on ESPN, whatever it is. So it was an interesting time, and I wish Derrick Rose could play forever. I wish Derrick Rose could have reached what everyone thought Derrick Rose could and should have been. And seeing him step away from the game is going to be strange because the NBA is going to be a different place without him in it, even if he's on the bench. So for sure, a tough pill to swallow, and forever an icon, the Rose from the concrete.
Yeah, I mean and I can hear from your voice. It's sad. I feel like as everyone who talks about him, it's since the injuries, it's always what could have been. There's just a hint of sadness when you tell the Derrick Rose story, considering how amazing he was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he did change the position. Like I think he was Westbrook before Westbrook in a lot of ways. I kind of view him as like if Westbrook was actually good at basketball, that's Derrick Rose.
You and me
Um,
both feel the same way.
it's just like what he was an example of. We just hadn't really seen before. Like what happens when the point guard's the best athlete on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
and can just always play downhill and above the rim, with just like a force that we've yet to see. I think Westbrook's probably the closest comp just in terms of like an athlete, um, but Derrick Rose was something special. I think and when I think of his career, I think of like the other moments, the injuries. I think of when he was at Minnesota, he scored 50. That was a
Yeah.
very emotional moment. The kind of the last kind of signs of who he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested to see what happens. I am, I don't want to spend the entire podcast on this, but and I, you know, I know you're a Chicago guy. I know you're a Bulls guy. That MVP he won over LeBron, I don't know. I think it's he had an amazing year,
Sure.
and I think part of the reason he wanted the MVP is a narrative award, and people hated LeBron. That was the year LeBron went to the Heat. That was the not one, not two, not three, not four, not five. The
Hmm.
Heatles, the big three, the people, the Cleveland fans throwing batteries at him on the floor. So I think there was a lot into not giving LeBron the award that year, even though he's probably deserved the MVP every year since 2009, up
Yes.
until his last Cleveland year, probably. Uh, so the Derrick Rose legacy is an interesting one. Without that MVP, what is his legacy? I think he won the Rookie of the Year. He had about 3 seasons at like the top,
Yes.
and then
Agreed.
everything beyond that is interesting. So the MVP, we looked before this. Every MVP who's retired is in the Hall of Fame. So he would
Hmm.
be the first MVP to not make the Hall of Fame. Now it's the NBA Hall of Fame. Pretty sure Vlade Divac is in the NBA Hall of Fame. Uh, Grant Hill is in the, Tony Kukoc is in the NBA Hall of Fame. So if you're going off of that, he probably makes it. I personally think I wish it was a little harder to get in. There's no disparage to Derrick Rose. Had he stayed healthy, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's not a question, obviously. I
Sure.
feel bad about it. I think he's probably got one of the highest approval ratings of any player. He's in. You're right. Like I recently moved from Chicago. The Derrick Rose culture impact is still tangible there, especially because it's the only team that they've had that was at all relevant since Jordan. And he's a local kid,
Hmm.
went to Simeon High School. Um, I think it's an interesting case when you look at Derrick Rose. I think when you hear him talk now, he's very like retrospective. He's very kind of like philosophical about like his own career, and he's probably had to go through a lot of like mental. He's done a lot of mental work to kind of adjust to like what his career ended up being. So it's a sad story. Derrick Rose, I think maybe he's with the names that we were talking about last podcast with Durant, Steph, LeBron. Maybe he's part of that story over the last decade, if he stays healthy, but he didn't. So with that, I'm not putting him in my Hall of Fame, but it's not my Hall of Fame. I'm curious, Mickey, would you throw him in there? And your general thoughts around the Hall of Fame, as a whole.
I think the NBA community, including the Bulls organization, regarding his number, for example, I think his number will be retired
Yes, I agree.
in Chicago, and I also think that he will be a Hall of Famer. Um, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, you can empathize with this, Mr. Vibe Navigator, because you felt the vibe when you were here in Chicago.
I did.
I feel like the culture and the lore behind Derrick Rose, what it means to be a fan of Derrick Rose, what he meant to the city, I think that in and of itself will raise his jersey in the rafters, and that in and of itself will get votes, despite people maybe trying to take that out of the context. But it's I think it's a really interesting discussion. I've had this conversation so many times with so many people over the years. Based off of the numbers, I would say no, that he isn't a Hall of Famer. Being at the top, the peak of his game for 3 seasons, he's absolutely one of the best in the league, if not the best for a short chunk of time. But I don't know if that constitutes making it, but I think that he will, and I will never be upset if he does. I feel like it's almost like a remiss type thing. Like, hey, we would be remiss to not have Derrick Rose hung up in the rafters. We'd be remiss to not have Derrick Rose be a part of the Hall of Fame, the NBA Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, I should say, because what he brought to the game. So I think it'll happen. Um, so I think that's the end of the positives I have to say for this. I have one negative thing to say
Please.
before we move on to talk about other NBA topics. I have to get this in, including everything that I just said. You would think, I would think, I think any rational human being would think that when Derrick Rose retired, if it was when he did, or if it was going to be in the future, in the short future, that one of the most obvious things in this world is that Derrick Rose would retire a Chicago Bull,
Mm,
and he didn't.
mm.
And that to me is without question.
Yeah.
One of the craziest things I have ever seen, ever. I do not understand how it's not possible, and I've spent so much time trying to poke a hole in this whole narrative that they couldn't do it. Derrick Rose wouldn't want it. Adam Silver wouldn't allow it. The Bulls don't have the contracts. But all of that is bullshit. All of it. I've thought this through and through, and I cannot find a reasonable explanation to why they could not sign Derrick Rose for a 10-day, for a day, for an hour, for a second, just to have him officially retire as a Chicago Bull. So him retiring was like, I get it. You know, this is going to happen inevitably. Every player is going to retire, right? And then this is the flood of emotions of thinking back when he was on the Bulls. You think back of what it was to have his injuries and all that. But the most obvious thing, all of that aside, is that he retires a Bull. It is like the most damning thing, the most accusatory thing of what it is to be a Bulls fan. But hey, uh, this is Jerry Reinsdorf at its finest. Not figuring out a way to make this happen. I just don't understand it. So this is a tough thing to see. It's like, again, as I had mentioned, the most obvious thing that anybody would expect and understand, that Derrick Rose, one of the Bulls legends, would retire officially as a Chicago Bull, and it didn't happen. And that it's not that big of a deal to the outsiders looking in, but that's like a little, little poke, some salt in the wound. It's just a small detail that has the impact of 1,000 suns that he retires a Chicago Bull, and it should have happened, and I cannot believe it didn't. And if he unretires for a day, a week, a month, a second, an hour, it doesn't matter, to sign that contract, and then retire again. I guess it'll improve it a little bit. But the fact that he didn't go out as a Bull is just absolutely mind-boggling and a true testament to where Chicago sports is today. So thank you, Mr. Reinsdorf, for making this happen.
I was that was gonna be my response to you saying there's no rational reason. The reason is Jerry Reinsdorf, and the way the Bulls are run as an organization, the way Chicago sports are seem to be run as a city, despite being they're the third biggest market in the country, and kind of across the board they're the little brother in terms of sports success and just operations in general. I mean the Bulls, it's sad, man. Like Chicago cares about the Bulls,
Chicago really does.
and they haven't had a lot to care about. Like those Bulls teams, man. Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, Jimmy Butler as a like young Jimmy Butler. Like those teams were a ton of fun. And the fact that they it took them as long as it did to even get there,
Mm-hmm.
and what the state of the franchise has been. You had a little glimpse with it with the Lonzo Caruso show for
30
like
something
half a
games.
season where you guys were real frisky with the.
Crazy.
Yep, yep, yep. You guys were a ton of fun, and then got snake bit again. I'm tired of talking about the Chicago Bulls, though. They suck. So I'm sorry, Mickey Swish. My condolences.
Appreciate it.
Derrick Rose, you had a great career. Not really. You had a great impact. You had a great 3 seasons. I think you're probably right, Mickey. He will get in because the NBA Hall of Fame is a bunch of softies. That's fine. Um, before we touch on the preseason, Mickey, have you heard about this show, The Starting Five, on
I
Netflix?
have. I have. I haven't watched it yet, but I've seen a bunch of clips.
Uh,
Looking forward to
um,
it.
it's interesting. It's for those of you who don't know. It follows around five NBA stars all through last season. It's similar to the show Quarterback, the show Receiver that they did around the NFL. It's LeBron, it's Jason Tatum, it's Domantas Sabonis, it's Jimmy Butler, and it's Anthony Edwards. And I'd say check it out, Mickey. Maybe we can talk about it going
Mm.
forward. Just wanted to say something really fast as a Celtics fan. The Jason Tatum part, it's fun. Like it's cool. He's got a kid. He's cute. He really likes basketball. He worked really hard
Deuce.
to get where he was. They dive into a little bit deeper. Yeah, he got Deuce. They dive in a little bit about how he got to the league, all that stuff. It's interesting, cool. And then they end the first episode just with like it's like 17 seconds leading up to who they're about to introduce in the next episode. And it's Anthony
Mm.
Edwards. And Mickey, let me tell you something. I this is a family show, so I'm not going to tell you what was going on with me below the belt, but I was feeling some things when they were teasing the Anthony Edwards
I
segment.
believe it.
It starts with him talking shit about LeBron. He's just walking. He's pulling out of his house in a Lamborghini. They're playing that Run the Jewels song, Ooh La La. And I've never clicked next episode
Right.
faster on a Netflix show. That dude is a superstar. That dude is everything I want a Celtic star to be that they never are. He has it. Like, he may not be as good as Tatum yet. He just, whatever he's got, I want it. Whenever he talks, I want to hear
Mm-hmm.
it. I want him to keep progressing. Like, he plays in Minnesota and I care. Like, that is something that no one's done since Kevin Garnett. And I think that's actually an apt comparison, speaking of personality. Um, just wanted to say, give it a watch. Maybe we can discuss things going forward. LeBron still corny as hell. I will say that, but Anthony Edwards definitively steals the show. So it's very exciting to see him at that such a young age as an up and coming American star.
Mm-hmm.
What that is going to mean going forward, as as that team's going through a little bit of a transition, as he's going to have to adjust to Julius Randle now that he doesn't have to deal with Cat anymore. Cat had one moment in this documentary where he's whining about not getting foul calls, and it just it's just every time he talks, it's just it confirms everything I think about him.
Mm-hmm.
When a 22-year-old is telling the veteran that you need to like keep your shit together and you can't even do that, that speaks volumes. New Yorkers enjoy. That's all I had to say on that, Mickey. Let's quickly touch on the basketball games. We've had some games, Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
We've had real life basketball games.
Sure.
Humans are playing basketball. Um, the Celtics kicked it off with the Denver Nuggets. Did you remember Russell Westbrook is a Nugget? Did people
It
remember
was
this? Did you
one
remember
of
that?
the jump scares I got when I was kind of looking through rosters to refamiliarize with them. I was like, oh, whoa, this happened. This is a thing. Did a little, rub the eyes a
Yeah,
little bit. Am I
yeah,
reading this correctly? I'll be damned. I am.
yeah, yeah. He was their big acquisition. Um, I'm curious to see what happens. And again, it's preseason, but we're here to overreact to preseason. And I'm going to tell you something, Mickey. Jalen Brown looks great. He looks fantastic. Now, his partner in crime, who I find frustrating. He seems to be. He hit some shots. It's like all the buzz around this season was he figured out that he took the hitch out of his shot. Jason Tatum did.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that's true. I don't love the idea that you're completely restructuring your jump shot right before the season starts. That's kind of concerning, but hopefully it works. But they look good, and I think the ball was flying around. Peyton Pritchard, the preseason All Star, he was cooking. I think the Celtics, they look ready. They look like a team that has been together for years, and they have
They
been.
have been.
They look like a team that's bought into what their coach wants to do. They got they have a look of a team that knows who they are, which I think is huge. I think there's a lot of teams in the NBA who are still figuring out who they are. So it's exciting, man. I just wanted to throw it out there. We beat up on the Nugs. Did you catch any takeaways from these meaningless games?
Well, that was. I mean, you kind of took the word, quite literally, the word out of my mouth. How much stock do you put into these meaningless games? I mean, I know as a fan, obviously coming off of the championship and seeing the team doing well, obviously there really isn't a negative thing to take from that. But it is preseason ball. I mean, are you artificially inflating
Mm-hmm.
expectations, or do you genuinely think, despite the fact that these games are meaningless and no one really cares, that this is a good sign going into the upcoming actual regular season?
Why you got to go and get rational on me? Like I
It's
just
my
wanted
job
to,
as the
I
ball
wanted to
knower.
get
I gotta check
excited.
the vibe sometimes. Come on.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. It's fair, and I'm definitely putting too much stock into these two meaningless games that were, well, again, played in Saudi Arabia. No, sorry, apologies. They were played in Dubai, which is United Arab Emirates. Let's be factual on this podcast. Let's not get things mixed up. This is being broadcast across the world. It's important that we get this correct. We don't want to lose viewership in that neck of the woods. Who knows? Maybe they're listening. Um, yeah, no, you're probably right. It probably means absolutely nothing. But you know what? I saw some good things, and that's okay. I also saw Cat, Carly Towns. We're gonna stop talking about Cat at some point, everybody. But I just can't. I keep seeing his stupid face, and I can't help but get annoyed at it. He had 24 points. 25 points in a preseason game. They were all like in the second half, which is like so cat when they're already up like 25 and he just starts gunning.
Yeah,
I just thought that was like of note to see Tibbs playing all his starters like an entire preseason game. That's very on brand.
that's the most Tibbs thing.
Um, and the only other thing I saw that stood out,
Yeah,
100%, 100%. The only other thing I saw that stood out was that Chris Paul lob to Wembenyama. That made me excited. That similarly made me feel some things. We're going to talk about the Spurs a little bit later. We got a fun little segment to end this. But yeah, Mickey, that's enough preseason talk. As the the journalist among us, the rational one, the one who you got to keep me in check sometimes because I get excited and I start thinking about gambling and I start thinking about picks and I really shouldn't take too much stock from these preseason games. So here's what I'm thinking, Mickey. We didn't get to go to all of our favorite potential storylines heading into the season. I figured we would hit a couple of these, talk about a couple each, figure out what we want to look ahead into the season. And then we'll end this with some of the teams that maybe aren't going to do so hot. But I think we both are interested in this one team, and I think it makes sense for us to start
yeah,
here.
definitely.
Let's take a look at the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's take a look at the Memphis Grizzlies. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mr. Ja Morant. He hasn't been on the floor as much as of late. But here's what I'm going to say about the Grizzlies. I think pre the Ja drama, they were perennially a top two, top three seed in the West. And that was when Ja, was a rookie, second year, third year guy. They're a very deep roster. I think they're very well coached. I love Desmond Bain. Jaren Jackson Jr., I still think has some growth as a player, but as far as a defensive minded big, a young defensive minded big, I love him as a pair with Ja. And I actually really like the addition of Marcus Smart this year. So I think, a lot of people kind of are looking at them as a potential sleeper to be one of the higher seeds in the
Mm-hmm.
West. I think I agree. Um, the Ja stuff, he could very easily go off the rails again. I don't love some of the vibes. He seems a little more repentant. Is that a word? He seems a little more thoughtful in looking back on some of his mistakes. So I'm hoping that he can put that behind him because he's an amazing player to watch. And speaking of, Derrick Rose changing the way the
Yeah,
position is played, I think
definitely.
John Morant is a prime example of
He's a
that.
perfect example.
So curious your thoughts on the Grizzlies, and I'll pull up. I'm gonna go ahead and look at their win
Sure.
totals while you give me your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, you touched on all the main things, man. It's just when you look at uh, Ja Morant, whether you're a Grizzlies fan or not, if you're a basketball fan, you want to see a talent like that play. You just want to see him ball. He's incredibly athletic. Obviously, he's in the same vein as guys like Rose and Westbrook, and just being just freak athletes that are super, super talented at basketball that can take over purely off of their athleticism. So just the NBA missed out on watching him thrive last year. Um, Quick side story: I was gifted tickets to see the Bulls and Grizzlies last season in January for Christmas, and at the time, Ja was scheduled to come back and play, and I was so excited. I get to watch the Bulls. I get to watch Ja Morant. I'm so hyped. And then very shortly before the game, like in the days leading up to it, and we're shutting them down. This is happening. We're not going to play him. It is what it is. I'm like, this is so frustrating. I just want to watch this man ball. So from a personal level, I felt so slighted. I'm like this close to seeing one of the all stars in this league play live. Not even being a Grizzlies fan, but I'm looking forward to watch this team. Specifically, obviously, Ja. He's guys like him, guys like Anthony Edwards, like these young and up and coming stars that just have this aura about them, this confidence, this bravado, and they have the game to back it up. It's really, really, really good for the sport of basketball. It's really good for the NBA when you have these type of beacons that anybody and everybody can focus and watch, regardless if you're a fan of the team or not. If you're a fan of the sport, you can sink your teeth into watching these young guys like Ja play, and it makes everybody happy to watch. Regarding the Grizzlies specifically, I think there's one interesting piece that I'd like to bring up. I've always been a huge fan of Steven Adams, and him no longer being with the Grizzlies anymore, I think is kind of a point worth noting. Like I love the way that he plays, and I love that dynamic, or loved that dynamic between him and Ja when they were together. When Ja was healthy and he didn't have any off the court stuff, and Steven Adams was also healthy and they're playing together. I love that dynamic between the two of them. Uh, that's gone. Now, I'm not saying Steven Adams is not replaceable, but I think he was a big factor in the Grizzlies being so successful for season here, season here, season here. I remember making the argument multiple times that one of the Bulls' biggest downsides is not having a guy like Steven Adams. So I petitioned numerous times that we go get a Steven Adams, if not the Steven Adams himself, which we did not. So I think I'm interested in seeing how that big man hole is kind of filled now that Ja's back and he's better than ever. I'm interested to see how Zach Edey plays. All the hype around him being this
That's what I was gonna say, Mickey.
suit.
You know who they do
They
have?
do.
They got the big
I'll tell
boy.
you what, man, and I will come out now before the season starts. I will make my opinions known. Last podcast, I made you and I and our opinions known about Cat. I am a Zach Edey hater. I will put it out there before the season begins. I am a Zach Edey hater. I will say it loud. I will say it proud.
Yeah.
I do not trust
Yeah.
him. I need to see it to believe it. I'm happy that he got drafted. Obviously he had some success in college, but I am not sold on this man being an NBA player yet. This is I need to see to believe. So until further notice, I will be I don't understand all the hype around this guy. He hasn't played a single play in the NBA regular season game. We got to see it to believe it. So I'm interested to see how that man keeps up with the athleticism and the pace of regular season NBA basketball, and if he can do anything close to remotely replacing Mr. Steven Adams and be that dominant big man that everybody thinks that he might be.
I'm kind of in, Mickey. I'm kind of in on Zach
Oh
Edey.
boy! All right.
And I can't believe I'm saying it. Uh, Listen, there's a saying around basketball. You can't teach height, and that man is so big.
7'4".
And you know what? You know what?
Mm.
Like you watch him, he's got two moves. He's got two moves. He's got a post up, dribble to the middle, jump hook, and he's got the counter drop step. And sorry, he has three moves. The counter drop step, he's also got the fake hook shot, duck under little scoop layup thing. It's all in the post, but I think with this team, like that dude, like what was amazing to me watching him in college is the shape he was actually in. Like he's not fast, don't get me wrong, he's still a big oaf, but the conditioning for him to carry that team in Purdue, like he was a lot of times like in the best shape on the floor. Like that dude just rim runs like
Yeah.
crazy. And I think if at the very least he's just a rim running big who can shoot 80% from the free throw line, like I think he's a piece that will help you, and he's specifically a piece that will help that Grizzlies team that wants to get up and down. They might have to wait a little bit for him to catch up with them as they're running up and down the floor in transition. But I think this is also a team that struggled in the half court. And I think he's gonna cause problems. Like that dude is a monster. And I love that he can hit free throws. Like I love that he can hit free throws because you can keep him on the floor. So I'm optimistic. Did I like watching him play in college? No, not for a second did I like watching him
Me
play in college.
neither.
But you put him with John Morant, you put him with John Morant, and then here's the other issue. You're correct. On the defensive side in the half court, they're just going to put him in every pick and roll
Yes.
and try and make him move his feet and exploit that. So that's the case for him not getting minutes because if he can't navigate that, then you honestly just can't play him. So your point is well taken. I will just say this that I think he's actually more skilled than anyone's giving him credit for, and I think that dude works his ass off, and I think he's in the right situation because he's the exact type of player that the Grizzlies need. All I hear about people talking about Zach Edey in terms of criticizing is that the Grizzlies want to play fast. The Grizzlies need a half court offense. That's why they always struggle. So I think he can be a kind of a glue guy. He may not be a starter, but I think he can be definitely a rotation guy, at least to start. And I could see him, putting up some decent numbers, especially you consider this rookie class. I don't know if you looked at some of these rookies, Mickey. These guys suck. The Risa Shea, Alex Sarr. Like Alex Sarr is a center, and he went 0 for 15 in a summer league game.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough look.
0 for
He's going to
15.
be solid already.
How
He
do you
did
miss
that.
15 shots when you're a center?
Yeah.
Like that. So I think the window's open here for a little sneaky breakout year for Mr. Edie. I actually think he's the favorite for rookie of the year as well, considering how bad some of these rookies look. But yeah, I'm optimistic. I looked, so in terms of win totals, their over unders 46 and a half looking ahead. Last year they won 27 games. John didn't play. They were rebuilding slash tanking. The last year the job played, they won 51 games. So it was 2 years ago. So I think 46 and a half is an attainable total for them to hit, with all their guys back plus Edie plus Marcus Smart, who I think is an important piece for Ja as well. I think Marcus Smart can really provide some
Without
leadership.
question.
I'm happy with the haul. I'm happy with the haul that the Celtics got after getting rid of him. Like I wouldn't take him back because he also ended up, for some reason, as my plight as a Celtics fan during the Marcus Smart era was just every game that was close ended with him trying to take a three to win the game for us. I'm glad that's over. But I think as a backup, we're not, as a second guard to Ja, I think he helps a lot. So I'm actually optimistic for the Grizzlies. And Mr. Edie, I know you're a hater, and I'm happy we finally disagree on something here. I think I'm gonna. This might be my new guy as we head into the
Hey,
season.
that's fair.
So we'll keep an eye on the
We
Grizzlies.
got to keep an eye on him and the team as a whole. Look, I may be wrong. I want to give him credit where credit's due. Obviously, he had a really good career at Purdue, and he got the respect and love for a reason. But I'm just not sold yet. I think he's going to be a huge, huge liability. And until I'm proven otherwise, I have to err on the side of caution. So we'll see.
I respect it. I respect it. He could very easily be Roy Hibbert. So we'll see. Um, that would be bad. That would be bad for me, and my potential rookie of the year pick. But we'll see. I haven't made any official picks yet. I'm just, I got some leans here and there. Mickey, you got any what was the topic that you had in mind as we look ahead into this season?
Yeah. I mean, one of the big ones that pops into my head, and I think this is a kind of obvious one for all NBA fans, again, regardless of your allegiance, is the Philadelphia 76ers. I think that's a team that everyone's going to be
Mm.
keeping their eye on. In terms of this like new semblance of a big three that they've had. This seems like the third or fourth iteration of a big three, including Joel Embiid, that they've had.
It's because it is.
Because it is right, and it's they keep trying, and hey, you may have heard this, I've heard this. They keep saying that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I don't know if this is insane, but I'll tell you what, I'm not the vibe navigator, and I don't have as good as a barometer as you do. But my vibe checker kind of says that this may or may not be at least a little bit insane, because it kind of seems like they've run this before,
Mm.
and we've seen what happens, and it doesn't seem to work too much. So this is again a we'll see. But if I were to pick one side, if this is going to work, it's not. I'd probably say probably not. Um, I'm not a huge fan of Embiid. I actually actively dislike how he plays the game of basketball. I hate it. How he is this
A lot of hate on this
a lot of
pod
hate on
today,
this pod.
Mickey.
I gotta say, unintentional. I have most love and appreciation for most NBA players. It happens to be that Kat and Joel Embiid are up there for like the two that I dislike the most, which
Yeah.
is unintentional. Don't want to bring it up, and and just be a hating ball knower here, because that's not my brand. But I think the way he plays is just unethical. I just don't like it. I don't think I'm not a fan. We could talk about that another day. But as a whole, I'm really interested to see how he meshes with this new cast. I'm just excited to see. I mean, Tyrese Maxey is a star. I would put him in the same class as guys like Ja and Anthony Edwards that we keep mentioning, in terms of these young guys that everyone's just like, man, there's so much talent here. I really want to watch this player again, regardless of allegiance. I'm looking forward to tuning in to watch teams like the Grizzlies, teams like the Timberwolves, and teams like the Sixers, just to watch these young stars like Maxey, Edwards, and Ja. And I feel like watching Maxey's growth is huge from the past couple years. So I'm really looking forward to watching the team just from that perspective, and how Joel Embiid kind of manages this new talent around him with PG, and it is what it is. And I'm looking forward to see what's going on there. And I think the whole NBA is going to have their eyes set on the 76ers because I don't know how many more chances they will have. I don't know how many more passes that people will give the Sixers and Joel Embiid for not being able to get it done.
Yeah, yeah. Over under for wins for the Sixers is 51.5. They won 47 last year, and they added Paul George. I agree with you on Maxi. I think he's a blossoming star. I think I view the Sixers, the Knicks. As a Celtics fan, I'm not scared of either of them until they show me. I think the Sixers are in a tricky spot because they've hitched their wagon to Embiid, and they have to. Like, so there is no out. It's not like you're going to trade them. So you tanked, you trusted the process. That process birthed Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. We all know where Ben Simmons is now. Now you're stuck with Joel,
Angelo Okafor.
who has yet to show that he can stay healthy for an entire season. And Jaleel Okafor, let us not forget. Let us not forget Jaleel Okafor. Uh, and so here you are. And Joel Embiid has proven when he's healthy, he's an MVP candidate at least, right? He's won an MVP. So you're not gonna be quick to get rid of the guy, but the just question is you then have to build around him and just hope he's healthy down the stretch, which he never is. So you don't have a ton of outs with this team, and you gone out. You went to get Paul George. Paul George, he's a guy that I is very he's a Hall of Famer. We started this pod with a Hall of Fame conversation. Paul George is a Hall of Famer. I can't really remember a significant basketball moment from him in a while. Like since he's been a Clipper. Like, yeah, I guess he had that one playoff series where Kawhi went down, where he played well and he kind of shook the playoff woes a little bit. But to me, his most memorable moments are those Pacers series against the Heat when he was in his first few years in the league. Since then, I think he's a dude that's happy to kind of fade into the background, um, which may work on this team. But when you need him to step up, I don't know how far that takes you if Embiid is hobbled or out. I think I could see this team winning a lot of regular season games, similar to the Knicks. But I think in a playoff series, I think they're where they were, where it all comes down to Embiid and how healthy he is and what his decision making is going to be. Because even when he's healthy, I don't love his decision making down a stretch in a close game. I think we even saw that on the Olympic team when he's playing with the best players in the world. It's still just a little shaky when he has the ball, like, and it's down the stretch, and you need him to make a play. And he's such a freak athlete and a freak, sized person that a lot of times it works, but a lot of it's like how many times you see this dude dribble off his foot or like fall over when he's trying to post up, and just I don't trust it a bunch like when it gets tight. So I think long term, if anything, I don't hate their regular season over. But once it comes playoff time, I could see them losing to like a Miami or a Milwaukee, or the Knicks. I don't trust it. I could see them losing to like a Pacers team. I don't know. I think it's all bets are off when Embiid's your best player. Um, I kind of still view them as like the little brother of the Celtics. They kind of look at. I know Philly fans will say that they're rivals with the Celtics. Philly fans, we don't think about you. I'm just gonna let you guys know. Like as a Celtics fan, we think about the Heat in the East right now. We don't Knicks fans. We don't think about you. We think about we think of that psychopath named Jimmy Butler down south. That's who we think about. That's the man who's perennially snatched our hearts out of our bodies, and I'm not gonna stop being scared of him. Um, and as we mentioned, that was my next storyline that I'm interested in. The Miami Heat. Here's what happens every year, Mickey. We count them out every year.
Dumb.
Every year we say they didn't make enough moves. They're bringing back the same roster. They're going to have a middling regular season, and then they make the playoffs. Last year, Jimmy Butler was hurt, so who knows what would have happened. I just know that I am scared to death of Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra. I think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA. And I think those dudes play their ass off every night, and they know when big games matter, and they meet the moment every time. The antithesis of the Philadelphia 76ers. When the game matters, the Heat are always get seems like they're always getting the loose ball. They're always getting a 50-50 ball. They're always hitting a three with a dude who never shoots threes. Caleb Martin, all of a sudden, back when he was on the Heat, he went from averaging 7 points a game to becoming, baby Michael Jordan against the Celtics. Those dudes just meet the moment, and I'm never gonna not be scared of them. And I'm curious, Mickey. I don't know if you paid attention to Media Day.
I did.
We didn't get costume Jimmy this year. We got serious Jimmy.
Yep.
We got all business Jimmy. We got contract year Jimmy. So the question is that real? Is he just grumpy because Miami didn't pay him? Either way, I think we're going to get a real Jimmy Butler year because Pat Riley's already called him out for not playing enough during the regular season. And we know Pat Riley does not like that. Pat Riley's old school. So I'm very curious about this Heat team. I think no one's talking about them. Only people are talking about the Knicks and the Sixers and the Celtics, who are the champs. So it's, I don't know if you remember, but we won our 18th banner last year, Mickey. But I'm worried about them. As a Celtics fan, they're the team that we've been battling with for the last 4 years, maybe even longer than that. It's been us and them. That's it. And we made the same amount of finals. So I'm curious your thoughts on the Heat. If you share my fear of them, and if you think they're legit.
I agree with everything that you said. I've been a huge Jimmy Butler fan for a long time. Obviously, he played in the Bulls, and he has been one of my favorite players in the NBA for a very long time. I've been on that train forever, and I have always been terrified of him when he was not, since he has not been in a Chicago Bulls uniform. I think that man is the best kind of psychopath you could possibly have in a sports organization. I love the way that he plays basketball. I absolutely love watching him play. I think he's a freak. And I think any team that goes against the Miami Heat when it comes to playoff time, regardless of their seeding, doesn't matter how good you did in the regular season, if you're playing against the Miami Heat, I agree with you that I also think that Eric Spoelstra is most likely the best coach in the NBA. I think that's normally a fair agreement upon NBA fans. If he's not number one, he's within the top three. But I would be terrified to play the Miami Heat in the playoffs, regardless of what their roster looks like and how they did in the regular season, because they have the ability to turn it on, and they have for quite some time now. Uh, Before playoff Jimmy was like colloquially known as like a thing, before it entered, the NBA zeitgeist, I was aware of playoff Jimmy. I've seen it. I've rooted for playoff Jimmy. I've seen playoff Jimmy on the other side, and it's a real thing. I don't know what it is in that man's brain, but he has something akin to like a Kobe or an MJ, where they just switch something on, and that it's just bloodthirst. It's unbelievable. So I think that Miami is legit. I always believe in I will always believe in that team. They figure out how to. I mean, you probably have seen it as many times as I have, but the meme where like you have all these players that they make their stardom in Miami, these role players, and then they go somewhere else, and then they're like, oh yeah, wait a minute, this guy is only successful because he was in Miami. He cannot reproduce what he was there. Oh, we forgot this guy was on the bench. He just so happened to be in Miami. Therefore, he
Correct.
looked like a superstar. That's a real thing. That culture, that system there. Uh, I'm taking the over on Miami. Whatever it is, I'm taking the over, dude. I'm in on Miami. I'm always in on that team. I trust Jimmy Butler. I trust Eric Spoelstra. He showed up serious to media day, as you said. That to me is he's taken names this year. He's like, you remember how I played in Milwaukee not too long ago? That's back. I'm going to be healthy, and I'm going to tear everybody to pieces and remind y'all who I really am when I'm not in my emo phase. So in Jimmy, we trust. He is Himmy. I'm a huge fan, and I think Miami should make a big move because I think Jimmy's back might break come playoff time if it's just him. So I think they should make a move. I don't know if they will make a move, but I think Jimmy needs a little bit of help to push them over the hump and really get them to where they need to be. Considering they've lost some real big pieces in the past couple of years to kind of help them uh, get the job done in the playoffs. So I'm in. I'm in on Miami. I'd be scared if I was a Boston Celtics fan or as a Bulls fan. I don't know how much we have to be scared of. We have to be scared of Jerry Reinsdorf. That's our biggest rival at this point. But other than that, I'm in, and I'm scared of Jimmy. I'm on. I am Team Jimmy. He's himmy.
Yeah, it's and we'll call that for the players that end up leaving Miami and doing nothing. We'll call that the Gabe Vincent corollary.
Sure.
Because you're right, is it's he just turns them into guys. It's kind of like Bill Belichick. Just these guys just finds value. They can create dogs out of nowhere. And I'm sure this year there'll be a guy we've never heard of that'll hit 7 threes against the Celtics in the playoffs, as they always do. Over under for wins is 43.5. The only thing I worry about with them is, Jimmy's saying all the right things in terms of playing contract year, focusing. It's still Jimmy Butler. He hasn't played. I think the past 2 seasons. It's been like I don't even know if he's cracked 60 games. So that would be the only thing where I'm hesitant to bet their regular season over under. If anything, I like them. I think they have value at winning the conference. Especially as the season progresses, those odds will probably even get better as the season goes on if they start to kind of take it a little easy, because it seems to me like they're comfortable just making the play in and then just like going from there, like the true sickos that they are. 43 and a half seems about right. I think that's a tough, I could go either way on that. But if you believe in Jimmy Butler, which I do, but more so in the postseason, I'd say. But if you believe him in the regular season, I'd say we could flirt with that. 43 and a half, just over 500. Um, yeah, I'd say just look out. Just pay attention to the narratives this season. There's going to be a lot of Knicks talk again. There's going to be a lot of Philly talk. People don't talk about Miami because I think kind of everyone is scared of them, and they kind of were all hoping that this era will just end. But as long as Eric Spoelstra is coaching that team, they're not going to be bad ever. Um, they just figure it out in a way that I find incredibly impressive. So kudos to them. They've made my life a living hell as a Celtics fan the last 4 years. It's been a fun few years. I'm glad we got our title, but they really did a number on me psychologically the years leading up to that. I'll never get over that 3-0 lead that they put up on us in the Eastern Conference Finals. We come back, tie it, and then lose in Game 7 to watch them get smoked by the Denver Nuggets. I will just that it's forever in my brain how I felt watching that Game 7 and us just getting destroyed the entire game.
Yep.
Mickey, I think it's time for us to do some dumpster diving.
Let's go dumpster diving.
This is our brand new segment, folks. We're gonna go. You know what? Any podcast can talk about the good teams and the good players. Not this podcast. This podcast, we're gonna take a second to just talk about some of these shitty teams, because you know what, Mickey? I have some thoughts, and I have some teams that I kind of like that aren't good by any stretch of the imagination. You and I prepped some teams beforehand. Turns out we had the same teams. I think we should start with the Hornets. What do you think?
Let's start with the Hornets. The floor is yours. Let's start. Let's hear what you have to say about the Hornets off the bat.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to say. I think I'm kind of in, Mickey. I think I'm kind of in. I think they have a chance to be like kind of good. Like I'm thinking maybe a top 8 seed. I'm looking at this roster. LaMelo barely played at all last year. He hasn't played the last couple years, really. I think LaMelo's good. I think he's an idiot. I think he has maybe the most punchable face in the NBA, but I think he's good. And if you look at the rest of that roster, Brandon Miller going in the second year, I was very impressed with Brandon Miller's rookie season. We didn't have a podcast at the time, so I don't have any proof of this, but I always was thinking he should have been the number 1 pick over a Mr. Scoot Henderson, who's wasting away in Portland. He's a swing man. He gives me, speaking of Paul George, he gives me kind of Paul George vibes. Can knock down a 3, very athletic, can finish in traffic. He's only going to get stronger. They have Miles Bridges. Here's the thing with this Hornets team. They have like the worst vibes ever off the floor. For those of you who don't know the Miles Bridges situation, go ahead and look into that. It's not good at all. The Hornets are stuck with like some pretty bad humans, it looks like. But this is an NBA podcast, and I have to be honest about how their prospects look as a team. They look good, and that roster of LaMelo, Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, they got some athletes, and they got a point guard to feed these athletes. I think they're going to be running up and down. I think they're going to be a fun, exciting team. And the biggest thing, Mickey, is they're in the East. So I think there's a window for them to sneak into something. If they were in the West, I'm not so sure. And I may be wrong. And I think the world in which I'm wrong is that LaMelo sucks and is not a winning player and kind of derails the situation by just trying to get his, which I'll be honest is very possible. But I'm getting out in front of this. I'm kind of in on the Hornets. Their over under for wins is 30 and a half in the East. So I don't hate it. They won 21 games last season with no LaMelo. I might be hammering that over, Mickey. What do you think?
It's not a crazy move. You forgot one key player on their roster here, who I would be remiss to not say, Mr. Taj Gibson,
Oh.
uh, someone who has to be mentioned.
He'll be a Nick by the end of the season.
It's very,
He'll be a Nick by the end
it's
of the
very
season.
possible. I don't know if I have such a favorable or positive outlook on their performance as I think you do, but I agree that LaMelo Ball, if he gets his head straight and he's focused on hooping, LaMelo Ball can ball. But I think their projections are what they are, and I think we both picked them to for this segment dumpster diving for a reason, and I think overwhelming, whether we want to call the elephant in the room or not. I will. I think it's just because of the culture of the team and the culture of the organization and kind of like this perception of
Yes.
the roster
Yes.
from the outside looking in. So I think, regardless of the talent that they have, I think overall, what's more important will ultimately, and that will ultimately swallow them. It's just the dynamics of the team, the culture of the team. Um, this flashiness, the off the court, excuse me, issues that they have. I think that's just too much, and I think that's gonna bleed into performance. And I think that their projection is what it is for a reason, and I think we picked them for a reason. And I think that quite literally over the past couple years, they have been called a dumpster team, like a flaming hot garbage pile. The Hornets. I've seen that on Twitter a million times, and I'm sure you have too, with all the stuff that comes out. So I'm rooting for them. All right, I'm not praying on the downfall of the Hornets, but I just can't see too much success from them. So that's why I picked them, and I think that's why you picked them too.
You're not buying into the leadership capabilities of a Mr. LaMelo Ball?
I'm not, but I am buying into the leadership capabilities of his father, Mr. LeVar Ball. So if you put him in charge, we'll see.
Hmm. I think he'd like that. I think LeVar Ball, head coach, back to the Chino Hills days, run and gun offense. I could see something there. Um, yeah, no, I hear you. I'm not. I have another team that we're gonna talk about that I maybe end up being one of my official picks here. But Mickey, yeah, why don't you take us to our next dumpster that we're about to dive into?
Sure. I'll take the lead here. I think one of the teams that I'm going to be kind of interested in watching, who was projected to be second from the bottom according to ESPN's official rankings, is the Detroit Pistons. Um, I don't think that there's going to be a whole
Mm,
lot of success with the team. I think they're ranked appropriately. If you don't mind looking up what their over under actually is, their projections are, because I don't know have that number. But
I
I'm,
gotcha.
looking at this roster, nothing really jumps out at me. I have to say, if they're here's the interesting thing here. Like the team, I think is going to do poor, but the point of this segment is why we're kind of watching, right? They're going to be in the dumpster, but what are we interested in? What's the interesting thing that's going on here? With the Hornets, it's can they kind of can they stop shooting themselves in the foot, right? Can they get out of their own way? Can they have success, right? With this, the reason why I'm kind of interested in this team is specifically one of their players, Ivy, Jaden Ivy. I'm interested in watching him play. I know kind of going back to kind of close to the beginning here when we talked about the Celtics and the preseason and how it's quote unquote meaningless. I understand that we said this in preseason is meaningless, but Jaden Ivey has been doing very well in the preseason so far. I understand the value here. That meaningless for Celtics, meaningless for everybody, right? But watching him and seeing the stat lines, I'm interested to see how he does. I have a feeling that he's going to have a little bit more control, have a little bit more of a green light. I feel like he's going to have more ability to kind of take over. I'm interested just watching him as an individual play because I think that his growth is going to be more noticeable this year. So I think the Pistons as a whole are not going to be too impressive. Cade Cunningham, he's got a lot of hype that he still haven't lived up to. Tim Hardaway Jr., interesting player, kind of bouncing around. I'm interested in watching him too, but my main interest in here, taking this out of the dumpster as we're diving, I'm interested in Ivy. I'm interested in Ivy. 14 wins last year, projected to be 25 and a half. That's the over-under this year. I mean, for the sake of it, I'll take the under, right? I don't see them getting marginally better over than 14 wins, but my main reason, not to beat a dead horse here, is just the individual performance of Jaden Ivey because I think there is something interesting there in this overall package that may not be too appealing. That is the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, I'm kind of still holding on to my Cade Cunningham stock too. I think um he's been in an interesting situation. I agree with you. They should have been. I look at this roster and it should be better. Like I think they have guys like Ivy, Cade. I like their rookie, the Thompson twin, who whichever Thompson is it, Asar or
Yes,
Amen. I think it's
Asar.
Asar. Ari podcast. Figure out which Thompson
It's
twin
Asar.
is Asar. Yeah, Asar Thompson. Um, Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, Beef Stew. Like I think they got some dudes. Like I don't think they should be this bad. Like why are they worse than the Wizards? Like why? Like I don't understand some of it. Some of this is probably the Monty Williams experience. I think he clearly it seems like he showed up for a paycheck. I don't think he wanted the job, and they just kept throwing more money at him, and it didn't work out. I think Monty Williams also kind of wasn't. I don't think it was a good fit for him and Ivy. I too think Ivy is good or could be good. I'll put it that way. I think they're an interesting team to watch for those two alone, right? I think for Ivy and Cade, seeing what comes out of that will be interesting. I kind of think it's either going to be the Pistons or the Hornets that will be able to sneak up. Because I actually, when you look at the Cade Cunningham, I was a believer coming out of college. He was at Oklahoma State on a weird Oklahoma State team. It was one of those situations where I believe he had a family member on the coaching staff, so he agreed to go there. So it wasn't like a top tier team. But I find him to be he does a little bit of everything. He's a he facilitates, he can get his own shot. I like the way he kind of runs an offense. I just think he was required to do a lot, and he needed some help there. So we said their over under was 25 and a half. That's still, that's an 11 game jump. That's a lot. I think I'd probably still lean under there. But again, I think the biggest thing that we're taking from this is the teams in the East. I think the bottom part of the East is kind of open because I think, you look at Detroit, you look at Charlotte, you look at Washington. I think Washington will be the worst team in the conference. Like, I hate that team. You don't talk about people we hate. I hate that team. I hate Jordan Poole. I hate Kyle Kuzma. I live in DC. You know how many Wizards conversations I've had? None. There's not one person talking about the Washington Wizards. It's gross. Their tickets are $7 and they give you 2 free hot dogs when you buy one. They just want people in the seats. Nobody cares. So I'm very interested to see how that goes, the Jordan Poole experience. Because I think that there's just a lot of garbage at the bottom of this East. So I think there's an opportunity for the Pistons and the Hornets, who we discussed. Mickey, here's the thing: there's another team in a dumpster that I want to get to. Our fearless producer here, and I kind of agree with his sentiment. He thinks we should save this conversation for the next pod and fully flesh out the San Antonio Spurs. I'm giving a little teaser to our audience because I want to deep dive this Wemby situation. I've done some homework that I'm going to bring to you next pod, and it's illuminating. It's going back through the histories of the NBA. I'm not just a vibe navigator. I'm a historian of the league. I've looked at previous all time big man, and their performances. And I think that's a conversation worth more time than what we have. So, what do you think about? We take a little pause here. This has been our debut of dumpster diving, but I got some more diving to do.
Sure.
But this one's going to be a little bit of a deeper dive into the San Antonio Spurs for next week. What do you think about
I
that?
think that's a good call. I think that's a good teaser. And to be fair, I think there are a lot of other interesting storylines that kind of make teams somewhat appealing. They're going to be in the dumpster. They're not going to probably do too hot, but something's in there that we may want to pick out. And I think the Spurs, along with a couple others, are worth noting. But again, maybe not now for time's sake. A nice little teaser for the next one.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think we table it there. That's been our episode 2, ladies and gentlemen. We're presented by the Orb. Our powers that be, our beautiful leaders at the Orb, have requested that I also mention that the Orb models are hitting 64% against the spread heading into Sunday. So if you're looking for some football picks, take a look at our Substack. You want some winners? 64% is unheard of for a gambling model. Mickey, it's been real, man. I'm excited to dive into more dumpsters next week. And Derrick Rose, congratulations on your retirement. I still don't think you're a Hall of Famer, but that's okay.
He will be given a proper send off. I think it's against the Knicks sometime in January. They have come out and said. So I think looking forward to that day. I don't know what's going to happen, but that'll be his proper farewell to Chicago, though he should have signed a contract and done it that way. But until then, kudos to Rose, kudos to a great career. I'm looking forward to talking about the big headlines come next podcast, other dumpsters that we got to dive into, and obviously other big things, big stories going into the NBA season. So thank you, everybody, for listening to Dishing and Swishing. This is Mickey signing off. Looking forward to the next pod.
See you, everybody.